Welcome to the Steve Ames Show with guitarist Sandy Renda, pianist Mike Yanuzzi, and my special guest, talk show host Josephine Shenman. And now, on with the show. I'm the Sheik of Araby. Your love belongs to me. At night when you're asleep, into your tent I'll creep. The stars that shine above will light our way to love. You'll rule this land with me, the Sheik of Araby. I'm the Sheik of Araby. Your love belongs to me. At night when you're asleep, into your tent I'll creep. The stars that shine above will light our way to love. You'll rule this land with me, the Sheik of Araby. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not really the Sheik of Araby. I'm the Sheik of Hillside, New Jersey, and now the Sheik of Springfield, New Jersey. And I'd like you to meet the Sheik of Rockaway, New Jersey, at the piano, Mike Yanuzzi. And the Sheik of Belleville, New Jersey, at the guitar, Sandy Renda. And ladies and gentlemen, tonight is a very special occasion for me because tonight, this month actually, I am celebrating my 30th anniversary in show business. Can you believe it? Exactly 30 years ago, in June of 1977, I had my first professional engagement at Mickey's Comet in Hillside, New Jersey. We'll be talking about that later. But right now, I'd like to say that in 30 years in show business, I've seen a lot of changes, which brings us to this next number. For there's a change in the weather, a change in the scene. From now on, there'll be a change in me. My walk will be different, my talk and my name. Nothing about me's gonna be the same. I'm gonna change the way I'm living, and if that ain't enough, I'm gonna change the way I strut my stuff. Nobody knows you when you're turning gray. There'll be some changes made today. There'll be some changes made. For there's a change in the channel since I'm on TV. A change in location and vicinity. I've been on TV and on radio, in motion pictures and a vaudeville show. Tonight I'm here to celebrate 30 years that have been so great. I'm very happy and I'm here to say there'll be some changes made. Hey, hey, there'll be some changes made. There'll be some changes made. Yeah!
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Edwards. I'm very happy to say that I'm a good friend of everyone in this room, including Steve Ames. He and I go back several years, and we formed quite a friendly relationship. And I want to offer my congratulations on his 30 years in show business. By the way, I'm a relative of his original piano player, the late Yolanda Peterpaul, who's a second cousin of mine. Steve has invited me several times to be on his show, which I graciously accepted his invitation. So once again, I want to say congratulations, Steve, and many more years in show business.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tony Addotta. I'm an actor and a singer. You've probably seen me on the show a few times. I'm here tonight to congratulate Steve Ames for 30 years in show business. As you well know, he's had me on his show many times, and my mom has been most gracious. Steve is a different type of talent than today's artists. He brings back nostalgia and some of the most beloved tunes that we would have lost if it wasn't up to him. I want to thank Steve for allowing me to give him a moment. Have a good day.
Oh, Steve. Oh, yeah. You wanted me to say a few things. Okay. Hold on, everybody. I've known Steve probably more. In fact, I've known Steve longer than anybody here, and it's a long time. No, he's been in show business, I hear, 30 years. I think I've known him probably 35 or so years. I've been doing his show, been the producer of his show for, I think it's 16 years now, Steve, and it's been really a pleasure and very informative. I've met a lot of interesting people. In fact, over the years, we've worked with so many interesting people, and we've kept dossiers on the various people. And tonight, I would just like to give you some of the history of the people that have appeared on his show. So we start with what? Oh, we don't have time? All right, next time we'll do it. Congratulations, Steve. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandy Renda, leader of Sandy and the Wanderers, and next to me is my astute musician, keyboardist of the band. And we are here to congratulate our true performer and show business for 30 years, Mr. Steve Ames. And truly and really, it is a pleasure to work with Steve. He's a lot of fun, true professional, and really loves show business. Now I give you Mike Yanuzzi.
Are we talking about the same guy?
You can have him.
Okay. Steve, happy anniversary, 30 years. I was a mere 7 years old when you first started in show business. But congratulations. We always have a lot of fun here. And Sandy and I are about to do our number for the week. And, you know, it just goes along with the theme of this show. We're going to do That's Entertainment.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and let's meet our very special guest for this evening, the talk show host of her own many, many shows on cable for many years, my good friend, Josephine Shenman. Welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Congratulations. A pleasure to honor you at this special occasion.
I'm so glad that you could be here tonight,
Thank you.
Josephine.
It's a lot of fun.
It's
yes.
nice to see you again because you're a good friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I want to tell the folks that we're doing something a little different tonight. In honor of my 30th anniversary in show business, instead of me interviewing the guest is going to interview me. So with that, take it away, Josephine Shenman.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's a real pleasure. As I say, congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have 30 years from 1977.
That's right.
Back. And may you go 130
I hope
forward.
so, like George
Absolutely.
Burns.
Right. Absolutely. I know you will continue in his stead. But you know what? Let's start. Give us a little bit about the early Steve. Can you,
Yes.
what was young Steve like?
Well, you're talking about the Steve in school before I went
Yeah,
into
with
show
the little-
business?
yeah, it's
I
little-
was the class clown.
You were.
I was the big ham.
Like, what would you do? Give
And,
us.
well, before I discovered show business, which was in the 4th grade as an entertainer, but not professionally yet, I was a pretty bad kid.
What'd you do?
I was,
Give us a story.
misbehaving. I was misbehaving.
Like what?
I was naughty. I would never listen. If
Would-
the teacher said stand, I would sit. If the teacher said go in, I would go out. I was always doing the opposite, and I was getting into a lot of trouble in the 2nd grade.
Why? Did you like the attention?
I
or-
liked the attention. That's what it was.
Okay.
And it wasn't until the 4th grade that I realized that the best attention is positive attention.
What grade was that?
4th grade.
What happened in 4th grade that made that?
There was a
bend?
play. Mrs. Eisenberg was our teacher,
Okay.
and there was a play called The 10 Dancing Princesses.
Ah.
And I did not get a role in that play because I was not one of the 10 dancing princesses.
You must have been pretty.
I was upset. I
angry.
didn't even get the part as the king or the page or the other parts. So what happened, Mrs. Eisenberg was very smart. There were like 3 or 4 kids who didn't get roles in the play. So she said, well, I'll take those kids who don't have a part in the play, and they can be warm-up men, which is sort
Oh.
of like an opening act prior to the play.
Did you buy that?
Yeah, so
Okay.
she said, Steve, you can come and do whatever you want. So I put together a 5-minute comedy act. I actually wore the straw hat, and I had the cane, and I patterned myself after my idol, Jack Benny.
Now, how did you develop that?
Well,
Because
I
that's
looked in
the
some
s-
joke books. I looked in some joke
Okay.
books and got a couple of jokes together. And then, as I said, I had been watching Jack Benny all my life, and I took a little of his timing, and I did the act, and I was a hit. I was a big hit. And from then on, anytime there'd be a party or a Halloween party, Christmas party, anything like that, I would be asked to entertain. So I started putting together new acts. And I did this from 4th grade all through grammar school, all through high school. And then I wasn't misbehaving anymore. No more naughty, mean-little kid. I was now a young entertainer. I was a ham.
Two things. I know why you're annoyed that you didn't make King. Because do you know what Steve means? The name Steve? It means-
Steve?
Steve, do you know?
In what language?
Well, in English, it means crown.
Steve means crown?
Crown. So that's probably why you were angry you weren't the king.
I didn't know that.
What I want to know is how did you develop your style? Because you just said you grabbed a straw hat and you so developed your.
Well, 'cause
your-
I had been
were you
influenced.
always in that leaning.
I was
or-
always a big,
Because you
tremendous fan of the great entertainers like Jimmy Durante and Jack Benny and George Burns.
You
I
sort of
love
like
those
carved,
people.
No, but you carved out a niche, which is the path that you followed. What
Well, it was
about these-
gradually. I didn't start as a singer, what I'm doing now. I
Mm-hmm.
really started more as a comedian. But then I heard my first Al Jolson record.
Okay,
And when
but
I
you
started
stayed
singing.
in that same niche. Do you see what I'm getting
Oh,
at?
you mean the
You're
old-timers?
always- Yeah, but
Yes.
you have quality that you've maintained and developed yourself.
That was because I always loved the traditional vaudeville style of entertaining, which I had seen in the movies and I had seen on television with Jimmy Durante and
so
Jack
just,
Benny.
you were just, I guess, bent to that leaning direction.
Absolutely. And then the
just
singing
stayed steady.
came a little later. I heard my first Al Jolson record.
Okay.
And that's what inspired me to sing. I started imitating Al Jolson. And I
Okay.
learned all his songs, you know, the Mammies and the Swannies and the Rockabys. Then the Eddie Cantor was a great influence. I loved his numbers, If You Knew Susie and Makin' Whoopee and all those songs. And then the George M. Cohan songs, Yankee Doodle Dandy. Those were my first songs.
But you carved out the Steve that we have today. But,
That's right.
If we can, let's go into some of your schooling because you have impressive. You obviously decided at some point.
Well, actually, all through grammar school and high school, I went to Hillside Grammar Schools and I
Right.
went to the Hillside High School. There was no theatrical training in those days.
Okay.
But when I was a junior in high school, that was June of 1977, that was when I made my first professional engagement, and that's what we're celebrating tonight, June of 1977.
And-
I was walking down the street in Hillside, New Jersey. There was Mickey's Comet Pizzeria Restaurant.
Okay.
And I was just walking by it on a Sunday afternoon, and a kid I knew from high school was working in there in the kitchen. It was a hot day. It was the summer. He came out, and he recognized me. He says, "Hey, Steve, you're the kid from high school who sings and dances and entertains all the folks." He said, "Go into the dining room." It was filled with people's Sunday dinner. "Go in and start singing for the folks."
Okay.
I-
Wait, how did you feel?
Oh, well, I said to him, I can't just go in there in the restaurant. So he said, wait a minute, I'll get the owner. So he brings out the owner, Mickey Ackerman, who owned the restaurant. He introduces me to Mickey, and Mickey says, hey, kid, do you sing? I says, yeah. He says, go in there and sing for my crowd.
What time of
just
day
like
is
that.
this?
Oh, about 6 p.m. on a
Okay.
Sunday. And I just was dressed very casually, and I did sort of the act that I had done in high school. Just started singing songs from the top of my head.
A Star is Born.
After I finished, Mickey says, hey, you're good. Why don't you come back Tuesday night? We have bluegrass bands every Tuesday. And I need an intermission act when the bluegrass band takes their break to eat their pizza. I need somebody to get up and do about 20 minutes. Could you do that? I says, you bet I could. So 2 days later, which was June 14th, 1977, I had my first professional engagement. I think I
Wow.
made $15 the first night, plus a pizza that I brought home to my parents,
Now,
plus a pizza.
did you have to get your own musician, or did they provide?
Well, here's what happened. The first 6 months I was there, I sang a cappella, which means without music. And I did my regular repertoire of Jolson, Cantor, and Cohan songs. Then about 6 months later, December of 77, the pizza chef, his name was Anthony Peter Paul. He came to me one day and he says, you know, Steve, my mother plays the piano. I said, really? So Mickey called her, and she came down, and her name, of course, was Yolanda Peter Paul.
Yes, absolutely.
And she came, and we hit it off right off, because I was then a teenager, and Yolanda was then close to late 50s, and she had grown up in the 1920s and 30s, knew every song in my repertoire by heart. I just said, Yolanda, play Ain't Misbehavin', play On the Sunny Side of the Street. Anything I said, she started playing. There was a big
What's
upright
the
piano.
special bond that you two had?
Yolanda was a beautiful person. We had Tony Edwards on the show earlier, who's also a great piano player, who works with me now, and he's Yolanda's cousin. Yolanda loved music. She was a very talented pianist, and she could play by ear. And she had perfect pitch, and she was a nice person. She
Yes.
loved show business. So from that first engagement at the Comet Pizzeria, that was where I got my foot in the door. Everything came after that. The next year, I graduated high school in
Okay.
78, and then I entered Kane College. Now it's Kane University,
What
but in
did you
those days,
study in Kane?
then
Did
I
you-
majored in theater. By then, I
Ah,
knew that I was going to have a career in show business, so I took all the theater courses that they had. They had a wonderful theater department, the best in the area, and I was there for 5 years, taking all the theater courses where I learned about acting, directing, stage dialects, stage presence. And then from then, I started going on New York auditions. And I
Right.
joined AFTRA, American Federation of Television
the
and Radio
unions,
Artists,
yes, you have,
Screen
right?
Actors Guild, Actors Equity. In the meantime, I'm doing gigs with Yolanda. We started in local restaurants, and then we started doing organizations, clubs, senior citizens, nursing homes, B'nai B'rith, Hadassah, Italian American, Elks, any organization
There's
you can think of.
Very few that you haven't done.
That's right. And
Right.
then we started booking ourselves. We did a few nightclubs, and but we found out our niche, our best audience were the private organizations and private groups. And then I even played the Catskills in 1986.
Oh, that must have been fun. How did that
was
come about?
Marvin Lewis, who was
Oh,
another
okay.
great piano player. You remember Marvin.
Well, let's. How many years was it with Yolanda? It was
Yolanda
20?
worked together 20 years with me,
20 years, right.
1977 to 1997.
Okay. And is that when you moved on to your next musician?
Well, while I was working with Yolanda, I also had some other musicians. If she wasn't available,
Oh, that's right.
I had
Back up.
Marvin Lewis, a great piano player who you
Yes.
knew very well,
Yes,
who was
yes,
a
yes.
professional from New York. I had Tony Santora, the guitarist, who was an old-timer from back in the 30s and 40s, who had played with Louis Prima's band, and he and I teamed up to do some shows. And then there was Murray Kenton.
yes.
Murray was an old-timer also. More recently, I played with Andy Wallace-Sinovich, who will be watching the show tonight. He's in Linden, and he's been on this show many times. And for the last 2 years, I've been working exclusively for my gigs with Mr. Tony Edwards. Let's hear it for Tony. Let's hear some applause for Tony.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. It's so nice to have him.
He's
And
terrific. And while we're talking about musicians, this year marks 8 years that both Sandy Renda and
And
Mike
the
Iannuzzi
Rendas,
have
and
been the
Iannuzzi,
musical
yes.
directors. They not only play
Absolutely.
for me so beautifully, but they play for all the guests who come on the show.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the television show. I've been in show business 30 years, but I've been doing the TV show 16 years.
16.
I started in
wow.
1990, around the time that
That's
you
right.
started. And that's, of course, all thanks to Mr. Jerry Schoenthal. Let's hear it for Jerry back there
Jerry,
behind the
yes.
camera.
An amazing videographer.
And on the television show, I get to do different things than I would do when I go out
Like what?
on a nightclub. Well, I get to interview people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't usually interview people in a nightclub setting. It's usually singing, telling jokes. I get to interview people, and I have a lot of fun. And then there's one more aspect to my career. There's acting.
The movie business. Yes, you've done some wonderful things.
And I was very lucky, you know, being in the Screen Actors Guild for many years. You have to meet the right agents. That's the whole thing. And I haven't worked as often as an actor as I have as a singer, because as a singer I can book myself. But in the movie, you have to get in the right door.
Absolutely.
But I was lucky. In 1993, I did 2 movies. The Pickle with
Yeah,
Danny Aiello, where I played a store manager, and then For Love or Money with Michael J. Fox.
Which is adorable.
You've seen it?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Well,
yes.
guess what? We've
What?
got a clip of it tonight.
Oh, my goodness.
This picture,
right.
we filmed it in New York City at the Pierre Hotel. I play a gangster. Michael J. Fox plays the
That was
concierge
Jack
at the
Kennedy's
hotel.
favorite hotel, yes.
It's still there, the Pierre.
No,
It's a-
Jack Kennedy loved that
the
hotel.
Pierre
yes,
Hotel.
yes,
Well,
yes.
that's right. We filmed it in New York at the Pierre Hotel. And this is a scene. You'll see me. You'll see the 2 other actors who play the gangsters, Harry Bugan and Steve Randazzo. And you'll see Michael J. Fox as the concierge. Watch.
Yeah, no cheese. I'm telling you, they're cheese intolerant. All right? Fine.
You've got a certain party registered here under the name of a real dunkhead named Gene Salvatore.
He registered here?
He here?
Dunkhead. Is there someone I should say is calling?
Yeah, we got a surprise for him. So you could tell him Joey Pickle says hello.
Tell him that.
Nah, you can't tell him that. It'll ruin the surprise.
Yeah, you can't tell him that.
What, you some kind of blabby rat bonehead?
Gene Salvatore, 1915.
Jeez.
That
was a lot of fun.
Adorable. How did they cast you? Because you're very similar to the
The
very-
agent, John Lyons, saw my picture in a book, in one of the
Okay.
casting books, and just called me. I auditioned for it, and I got the part, and it was released by Universal Pictures, and it's been on television many
Many
times.
times, yes.
It's still running on TV, so you can
every so
watch
often.
it.
It's adorable.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
wonderful
much.
actors and everything. Now, you have some special people that you want to recognize.
Well, I talked
and-
about all the great musicians I've worked with. I want
Yes.
to talk about another man that's very special in my career, Walt Gollander, because he got me my first TV show when I was a guest. I mentioned that I started this show in 1990, but in 1980, through all the decade of the 80s, I was a guest on other people's shows.
Which shows were you on?
Well, Walt Gollander got me on a show called Talent Tonight with Yolanda. It was Steve and Yolanda. And in those days, I was Steve B. Ami. I have to mention that Steve Ames didn't come about until 1981.
How come?
Because
what happened?
I was born Ami, A-M-H-I,
Right.
and I was using my middle initial B for Benjamin, and I was
Okay.
billing myself as Steve B. Ami for my first 4 years in show business.
Why did you
Name was
change?
always getting misspelled in the newspapers. They would spell it Bambi sometimes, you know? So I said, I have to come up with a new name, and I worked on it, and then I said Ames. A-M-E-S. I keep the A-M for Ami. I change the H-I to E-S, which you take from Steve, because there's an S and an E in Steve, and I became Steve Ames. But the first couple of TV shows I did, Talent Tonight, The Jerry Leopoldi Show, Starburst Kids, Meadowlands, I'm billed as Steve B. Ami. And then I did the HBO special with Joe Piscopo, Campus Comedy, and I think that was my first TV show as Steve Ames in 1983. And then came the Joe Franklin Show. I love going on the Joe Franklin Show because he's my favorite, Joe Franklin.
Absolutely.
He's a great nostalgia king, as you would call him. And then the Uncle Floyd Show. I really enjoy working with Uncle Floyd. But also, I did a lot of radio shows back in the 80s with the great Joey Adams
Right.
on WEVD, and I took along Marvin Lewis and Tony Santora, and I made a record album.
Yes, well,
And
the
it was
Roaring
produced by, right, the
20s.
Roaring Twenties Roar Again, produced by Walt Gollander on the Golly label. And on the record album, backing me up, we had Yolanda Peter Paul, we had the Jersey Bounce with Charmin Howe, Alfred Natoli, and Alfred Jr.,
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
the great Tony Santora on the guitar. And we did all the great songs, including Chic of Araby, which we did tonight
You've
from
had
the 20s.
quite a family of showbiz people to surround you.
I'm lucky.
And
It's
walk you
teamwork.
through your 30 years. Marvelous.
Absolutely. It's teamwork, and I thank you so much for coming tonight to help me celebrate.
This is a pleasure, but tell us, of all the things you've done, what was number one, the biggest fun?
The biggest exposure was the HBO special where I did my act that was all over the country, and definitely being in the movie. That was the biggest exposure. But I just love being in front of an audience.
But the thrill for you is all the same?
I think just being a hit that night, wherever you are, doing the best you can be, being the best you can be, it's a great feeling.
You're a bit of a philosopher. That's wonderful. I brought this for you. I usually give this to my guests, but it's a music award for Steve on your anniversary.
Oh, how nice. Steve Ames, 30th Showbiz anniversary.
Absolute today,
18th of June, 2007, from Josephine Shenman.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you, Josephine. Yes, in 30 years of show business, I've seen a lot of changes, but one thing has remained the same, and that's my love for show business. Irving Berlin was so right when he wrote, "The costumes, the scenery, the makeup, the props, the audience who lifts you when you're down. The headaches, the heartaches, the backaches, the flops, the sheriff who escorts you out of town. The opening when your heart beats like a drum. The closing when the customers won't come. There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing. Everything the traffic will allow. Nowhere can you get that happy feeling when you are stealing that extra bow. There's no people like show people, they smile when they are low. Even with the turkey that you know may fold, you may be stranded out in the cold. Still you wouldn't change it for a sack of gold. Let's go on with the show. There's no business like show business, like no business I know. You get word before the show has started that your favorite uncle died at dawn. On top of that, your pa and ma parted. You're broken-hearted, but you go on. There's no people like show people, they smile when they are low. Yesterday they told you you would not go far. That night you open and there you are. Next night on your dressing room they've hung a star. Let's go on with the show. Let's go on with the show.